Welcome again, everyone, to today's student success session. This is the third event in this particular series that we're hosting this spring. We began hosting these student success webinar workshops last year for students around when the pandemic started to really affect all of our lives. And we know that students were under even greater stress than they have been traditionally. So we wanted to create a space for you to come and hear a little bit about some of the things that make students successful and get some new ideas to help you. So we hope that this session today is helpful. It's been very popular for those who attended last session and have watched the recording. And to lead us through critical thinking and research skills is Dr. Amy Dietzman, who will be our wonderful presenter today. So I'm going to pass it over to Amy, but again, I'm Lauren. I will be helping moderate and answering questions at the end of the session, moderating some questions to Amy to answer as our expert. So have you have any questions in the meantime, just use the question box, and either between myself and Marcus, we will help assist you, or have your question held for Amy at the end. So Amy, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Dietzman, and here's just a little bit about me. I've been working in education for over 10 years. I have worked both in K-12 and in higher education. I'm a mom of 2 boys, and I got 2 of my degrees while working full-time and caring for them. They were very young at the time, so when I talk about student success, it's partially because I have taught a course on it and I know what so many different students go through. But I was also an adult student juggling and going to school. So much of what I like to talk about in these webinars really comes from my own experience. Today in this webinar, I'm going to cover a lot, actually. We're going to talk first about critical thinking. We're going to think critically about critical thinking. And we're actually going to talk about what critical thinking is and how we can be critical thinkers. We're going to talk about finding sources for our research, identifying assumptions and biases, and how they can influence our research. And we will talk about the all-important subject, academic integrity and plagiarism. Now, I must preface all of this by saying we live in a divisive political climate right now, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about might seem like I'm addressing issues we face in politics and in the world. But I want to assure you that while you can draw a lot of parallels and connect a lot of this to those issues, what I'm really talking about has nothing to do with politics. It's about how you find and analyze sources and how you determine what your own thought processes are when you look at research. So critical thinking is the objective analysis and evaluation of facts to form a judgment. So let's pull that apart a little bit. Important words here are analysis and evaluation of facts. A lot of people think that it is in our nature to think critically. But I would posit to you that most of us tend to believe the things we hear and see without always asking about the truth. Much of our thinking left to itself is actually biased, distorted, partial, uninformed, sometimes prejudiced, yet the quality of our life and that of which we produce depends precisely on the quality of our thought, especially as students. So excellence in thought is not easy, and it must be systematically cultivated. And that's why it's important to be educated. So what does it take to be a critical thinker? Now, these are all reasons to think critically in our everyday lives, but how does critical thinking lead us to be better students and better writers? A critical thinker raises vital questions and problems. A critical thinker gathers and assesses relevant information. A critical thinker effectively comes to well-reasoned conclusions and solutions. A critical thinker thinks open-mindedly within alternative systems of thought. A critical thinker recognizes and assesses assumptions, implications, and practical consequences. And a critical thinker communicates effectively with others. So have you ever had a debate with someone who was like super well-read and informed, Maybe you immediately realized you were out of your league because while you thought you knew a lot, you realized you really didn't. You might notice that this kind of person is open to talking and wants to hear your perspective. What made that person a critical thinker? Alternatively, have you ever had a debate or an argument with someone that based everything they said on hearsay and became very emotional? You could probably say exactly what that person was missing in terms of clarity in their thought processes. You may have noticed that that person was not very open to hearing your opinion and was probably not a great communicator. You've also probably had a conversation with a know-it-all who wouldn't listen to anyone else. Where does this person fall in the scale of critical thinking? If you're looking at this list of things I just read to you, where do you prefer to fall? Ask yourself this question. Do you want to be the type of person who is knowledgeable and well-read, but also wants to hear differing opinions? I'm guessing most of you would probably say, sure, I'd like to be like that. Part of being a critical thinker is knowing your own assumptions. And I'll admit that in this day and age, I've seen things on the news before and thought, wow, did that really happen? And my instinct is to believe it. But I have to remind myself to go to the internet and look for proof. Are there pictures? Is there a video? Who else is saying the same thing? Identifying our assumptions is a first step to knowing what baggage we are carrying into our research. Sometimes we can have assumptions about things and we don't even realize it. So when I was in college, I did a speech on the glass ceiling and how women don't make the same as men doing the same jobs. I did this in the 90s. But you've probably heard this story. It's still an issue today. And I was so passionate about it. I did my research and I thought I had this thing nailed, an A+. But my professor hated it. She said my presentation was completely biased and not objective. And I remember thinking, how does this woman not like my speech about women? Well, what she was really trying to teach me was to present my facts objectively and without bias. Now, maybe if my assignment had been about trying to persuade, it would have been okay. But that was not my assignment. Presenting an argument is not the same thing as persuasion. An argument is based on facts and is usually presented in both sides. You tell both sides. Persuasion is more about your own personal opinion, and it's generally just one-sided. So there is a time and place for persuasion, but beware. It is not used as often as argument. And even if there are any K-12 people on this call right now, I also want to say persuasion has gone by the wayside in K-12 too. So really it's about argument. As critical thinkers, we need to identify and evaluate our assumptions before we accept something as truth. We need to follow an argument to its conclusion. I think of how sometimes I read a headline, like for a news story, and I don't read the whole article. Sometimes the headline is deceiving. Sometimes it's attention getting. Sometimes it's not really what the article is about. We need to follow an argument to its conclusion, and that means that we read the whole article and others like it. Spot contradictions and faulty logic. This means that we can see when things don't necessarily add up. So I'll give you an example. This is old, several months ago. I saw a headline to an article that read, adults with COVID-19 about twice as likely to say they have dined at a restaurant. Now, if you've ever done research before, you know that correlation is not the same as causation. So what this means is that people aren't necessarily getting COVID at restaurants, but it could mean that adults who admit to eating out at restaurants are also a little more relaxed in their overall feelings about COVID. Or maybe they don't take the same precautions, or maybe they take more risks than others who don't go to restaurants. So when we read, we have to stop and think about contradictions and logic. Critical thinkers also draw appropriate distinctions, and they also avoid extremes, and they exercise foresight. Foresight is the ability to look ahead and consider future possibilities. Bias prevents you from being objective. You need to present factual information and informed assertions that are supported with, very important words here, credible evidence. Avoiding bias means that we need to write in the third person almost always. Avoid using I, because now you've put yourself there. Avoid using the word you, because now you sound like you're preaching or you're writing a self-help book. Avoid your personal feelings. Be specific. If there is a statistic that you can use it. Don't say a lot or most or an alarming number of people if you can put an actual number on it. Use people first language. Means don't say the disabled child. The child with a disability is people first. See, he's a child first. His disability is not the definition of him. And then just over the past few years, gender neutral phrases and pronouns have become acceptable and preferable, really. It is preferable to use they and them instead of he, she, or her, him. Now, that used to be grammatically incorrect. And if you're old school like me, you might read a sentence and say, that doesn't sound right. But it isn't grammatically incorrect anymore. So here's some examples of biased statements. So the first one, the disabled boy enrolled in the geography class. Well, I told you that before, we don't really want to say disabled boy. We want to say, first of all, the boy with autism enrolled in the geography class. See, now we're being more specific, and also we're putting boy first. And then you can say something like this: all reporters report accurately on the news. Well, we know that's not always true. Most reporters do their best to report accurately on the news. Is probably a little bit better. So precision is essential in scholarly writing. When you refer to a person or persons, choose words that are accurate, clear, and free from bias or prejudicial connotations. Bias, like inaccurate or unclear language, can be a form of imprecision. For example, using man to refer to all human beings is really not accurate, and it's not inclusive. Instead, you should use the word individuals or people or persons. So, funny story, my mom told my sister and I this story about our cousin who is a girl, and my mom said she became a fireman. And we laughed and we said, Mom, you mean firefighter? Now, my mom's 77 years old, so we give her a pass, but we should, as writers and educators and those being educated, we should try to adjust our language to avoid bias whenever we can. Being informed means that we read all the perspectives, even when we don't like them. It means looking at what may not be popular to you and what may not be interesting to reach the kind of conclusion that you need to reach. If you've been given an assignment and the instructor has provided you with several articles to read to complete your assignment, a good rule of thumb is to still conduct your own research. The easy way is to just read what's been given. But to gather your own information and ensure that you're getting the full picture is always a good idea. And it's a good idea to keep reading. Read more. You'll never say to yourself, why did I read and conduct thorough research? Or what a waste of time. As a professor, I can tell you that I am always impressed with the student who includes more research in their paper than just the readings that I provide. It shows initiative and it shows a willingness to work hard to improve a grade. So I'll just throw that out there. It never hurts your grade to do a little more research. So where do you find credible sources? Remember, I talked about credible evidence. It's really important, and I'm going to talk about it a lot. So many libraries, schools, and universities have electronic databases. Look for a database link on your local library or your school website. Check out things like ProQuest, ERIC for scholarly articles. You can also look through the New York Times archives for historical sources. Use primary sources, meaning use the original document and not someone else's summary of it. If you read someone's summary of something and you think, wow, that's really good information, go find the original source. And then look at the domain suffix. This means if it's a .edu, a .gov, or a .org, in general, these are reliable sources on the web. However, beware of political sites used to sway public opinion. These are sites that you should really use with caution, checking for credibility and authority. Company websites usually end in .com. And these sites are great for information about a particular company. However, be sure that you only use company websites in appropriate situations because they sometimes are there used to promote. They want to sell their company. Make sure that that information is non-biased. And while many professional organizations end in .org, there are also many .orgs that are biased and promote an agenda. So just be sure you put on your critical thinking cap and read these sources with a focus on what could be biased. So use Wikipedia. Now, let me just say, you're going to use Wikipedia in a more awesome way. So over the years, Wikipedia has become more reliable, and it's a pretty good general source of information because it has a large audience of readers and it has pretty rigorous editorial guidelines. But many educators still will tell you they do not want you to cite that as a source in your paper. However, you can go to the references section of each entry, and that is rich with source material. So you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the entry, and you'll find a list of resources related to that topic with links to the resources themselves. So this is a good place to start. And really, this is true of any resource. If you find a good article, go to its references page and see if you can find additional articles from there. Use the titles, the journal titles, or the author to search for those in your online library or in Google Scholar. If you've never tried Google Scholar, it's a great database of research-based materials, but sometimes you still have to have a login from your college or university. Check the dates of your source. So if you're citing something that's more than 5 or 10 years old, it is no longer credible because more research has likely been done. The world has changed, issues have changed. So the only time, of course, that's not true is if you are citing a primary source. And then examine the author's credentials. If you're not sure whether or not the author is a credible source, look them up, Google them, see what they do, and then go with your instinct. Sources that are probably not credible are opinion or op-ed pieces and editorials. If you notice all caps and exclamation points, it's probably not credible. Or if the website seems primitive and not professional, it's probably not credible. And this one's a joke, but I used to tell my high school students, if it's called Tom's website, it's not credible. Articles that are just a paragraph, also probably not the best. And if you sense that there's persuasion, someone's trying to convince you to do something or convince you of something, then it's not outwardly called an editorial, but it still probably is. And remember the big picture. Sometimes when we're reading articles for research, we get narrowly focused on issues within issues. It's like going down a rabbit hole. But remember the larger issue at hand so you can keep your perspective. So we talked about finding credible sources. Now let's talk about how you use them. So after you introduce evidence into your writing or presentation, you must say why and how this evidence supports your argument. In other words, you have to explain the significance of the evidence and its function in your paper. So as writers, we sometimes assume that our readers already know what we're talking about. And we may be wary of elaborating too much because we think this point is obvious. But readers can't read our minds. Although they may be familiar with our topic and many of the ideas we're discussing, they don't know what we're trying to do with our ideas unless we indicate it through explanations, the way we organize our paper, the way we transition from paragraph to paragraph, those kinds of things. So try to spell out the connections you were making in your mind when you chose your evidence and when you decided where to put it in your paper. So these are good questions to ask yourself when you're writing and when you're determining where your evidence should go. Okay, I've just stated this point, but so what? Why is it interesting? Why does anybody care? What does this information imply? What are the consequences of thinking this way or looking at a problem this way? Okay, I've just described what something is or how I see it, but why? Why is it like that? That's where your evidence goes. I just said that something happens, so how does it happen? How does it come to be the way it is? The word how is also important, and that's where your evidence goes. How is this idea related to my thesis? What connections exist between them? How does it support my thesis? How does it do that? Can I give an example to illustrate my point? So every time you draw a conclusion, you need to check that you have enough evidence to do so. Remember that every claim needs evidence. So how do you know if you have enough? Well, I usually conduct all of my research before I start to write or plan out my presentation. I like to have the big picture. What do I know? What am I going to say? What are my claims? And how do I back it all up with my credible evidence? So if I'm going to try making a claim and there's no evidence to support it, well, then I know that before I even waste time writing, that I'm on the wrong track. This also helps me to check my own biases and my own assumptions before I begin the writing process. See, if there's no evidence to support what you're trying to say, then that's a pretty good sign. You may have an assumption or a bias there. Then once I have all of that clearly defined, I start to write. So I've talked about color-coded notes before in my last webinar, but it's worth repeating. I color code my notes. I do it by paragraph because usually each paragraph is a new claim. So if my first paragraph is my first claim, I might color code all of my notes for that claim in blue. And then my second paragraph notes might all be purple. My notes from my third paragraph might all be pink. And then when I look at my notes after I've finished up my research, I can easily see what paragraphs need work. If I have hardly any pink in my notes, then I know right away I don't have enough evidence to support my claim in my third paragraph. So I'm going to show you an example of my notes in just a second. Here's a very simple way to formulate your paragraph. You start with your claim. What's the point of your paragraph? Then you use your evidence to support it. What does the research tell you about it? What can you insert into your paragraph to really make your case? Then use reasoning. Reasoning is how you tie it all together. Why is it important and how does it really connect? And then before we go too far down the road of what it means to provide evidence, we really should talk about the right way to support your ideas. Plagiarism would be the wrong way to support your ideas. Plagiarism is taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. If you didn't make it up and you didn't pull it from your own brain, then it is someone else's. So 40% of undergrad and grad students admit to cheating on written assignments. And that can mean that they don't cite something properly. It can also mean what I discovered recently in one of my classes that I teach was when my students submitted their paper through Tutor.com and it was flagged and I looked it up and realized that it was an exact copy of a paper another student submitted the semester before. Now, that's downright plagiarism, cheating, and it's pretty stupid if your instructor uses a plagiarism detection program like Tutor.com. You're never going to get away with that kind of blatant cheating. But what I more often see, I don't see that hardly ever. What I more often see is the student who submits full sentences and full paragraphs from a website without citing it or without putting quotes around it. Many, many times we plagiarize by accident. In fact, I think most of the time it happens by accident, but we have to be careful not to do these things. So I have a friend who turned in parts of a paper in 2 different classes. Same paper, 2 different classes, 2 different instructors. She had no idea there was something called self-plagiarism. She thought, hey, these are my own ideas, so I have a right to use them. And it just so happened to be that they fit in 2 different classes, but she was terribly wrong. She got in big trouble and she almost got expelled. You should not use your own written words for more than 1 class without making sure that it's acceptable. If you're not sure, ask your instructor if it's okay. Another way we plagiarize is by reading something and then we forget about it. We forget that we read it. This happens when we forget to cite it in our notes. So we read something and we think, wow, that's really good. And we add it to our notes and we think about it some more and maybe a few days go by and then we sit down to write a paper and that thought has become ingrained in our process. So somewhere along the line, it just comes out perfectly in what we're writing. We've forgotten that it originally came from something we read. So see, reading and then taking good notes and actually citing what you read in your notes is super critical to not plagiarizing. So here's how we can avoid this accident I just talked about. We can be very careful of the cut and paste. Now, I don't mind cutting and pasting directly from my source into my notes, but not into my paper. Before any cutting and pasting into my notes, I always ensure that my source is listed. See at the top there? That way I remember that no matter how many days go by between my note taking and my writing, that I did not come up with those ideas by myself. I also wrote out my reference page or my works cited or my bibliography, whatever you call it, early. In fact, like most of the time, I write out my reference page first. Then I include the full reference in my notes just to make sure that I didn't accidentally plagiarize. And I usually also include the citation in my notes too. This way, when I go to put the information into my own words, I can quickly cite it. So just to reiterate, these are my notes. The colors are my paragraphs. Remember how I talked about that before. The references are what go onto the last page of my written document. That's usually called your reference page, your works cited, or your bibliography. And then that little Sing 2013 in the parentheses there, that's my citation. That's what goes into the body of my paragraph when I use the ideas from these notes. So that brings me to paraphrasing versus quoting. You should paraphrase most of the time. It flows better and it shows that you've been able to take the information in, process it, and put it into your own words in just the right place in your paper. Paraphrase if the information you are presenting is unlikely to be questioned, which should be most of what you are presenting. Quoting throughout your paper can come across as choppy, and it also sends the message that you might have taken the easy way out. See, it's really easy to drop quotes all through your paper. It's a lot easier than to actually take the information and paraphrase it. On the other hand, you should quote if you can't say it any better than how the author said it. If their words are just so profound or so witty, and you believe that it just has a bigger impact if you quote it directly, word for word, then you should do that. Also, if you are taking a very unique position that relies on the reader understanding exactly what that another author said about it, then quoting might be appropriate. And just be sure that when you're quoting, you use proper transitions and phrases leading up to and in and out of your quote to make it flow better into the rest of your paragraph. And also provide the appropriate amount of context. So regardless of if you quote or paraphrase, you still need to cite it. Remember, if it's not coming from your own brain and you didn't make it up, then it's plagiarism no matter how you put it in your paper if you don't include the parenthetical documentation, the citation. That's the key to showing that it isn't yours. And I should point out that a citation looks different if you have to use APA or MLA or Chicago or whatever citation style you use. The citation will most likely also look different if you paraphrase something versus if you cite something directly, like if you quote it. Your citation will look different. So you have to make sure you understand that. So this webinar has been all about critical thinking and research skills. How do they tie together and where does plagiarism come in? Well, it's all about being an educated, well-read student and understanding that as you become a critical thinker, you will question what you read and hear, and you will formulate a stance on these issues by analyzing the facts. You will use the research and ideas you've gained from reading and watching videos to formulate a solid argument. In that process, you need to remember that the information is not yours. That is what academic integrity is all about. As a side note, Tutor.com has a writing center that many of our writing tutors have helped me create, and we add to our site regularly. And we feel it has some really simple, easy to follow articles about citations, writing paragraphs, when to use commas, all kinds of things, different types of essays, how they can be structured, and more. It's free and it's open for you to use anytime. So back to our checklist for critical thinking. Step 1 is to become a critical thinker. Step 2 is to be educated and well-read. That leads to becoming a critical thinker. Know that you have biases. Avoid showing those biases. Think about what you might be assuming, what your assumptions are before you start writing a paper or presenting something. Step 6 is to find credible evidence. Cite that evidence. Make sure that you take proper notes because that will help you from committing plagiarism. Step 9 is to paraphrase most of the time. And 10 is to quote sparingly. Only quote when you absolutely have to. These are my references. Like I told you, I always provide my references, and I always do that first. And before we get to questions, I just want to let you know that next week, I hope you'll join me again for my final webinar in this series. It's about stress management. So we're going to talk about how to manage stress from being a student and juggling all the other things that you have going on in your life right now. We're going to talk about how to make stress your friend, and we will talk specifically about strategies for preventing and managing stress. And so that's next week. So now I'll send it back to Lauren.
Thanks, Amy. And as always, your webinars are very helpful for even those of us who are not students. I think we all need to be thinking about how to consume sources, media, synthesize, things together. So I think that's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody if you have any questions. You want to ask Amy some questions, please put them into the question box. Doesn't look like we have too many questions at the moment. But there does seem to be one or two here about plagiarism, so let me look at that. If an idea is original, hold on, let me make sure I understand this. If no idea is original, then every thought we have comes from somewhere else. How does this factor in with plagiarism?
Oh, that's good. Well, I think drawing conclusions about certain information, those are your own thoughts. So I think what's really important to note is that when you start to research for a paper, what you're reading at that point, those are the things that you need to take notes on and make sure you're citing. Things you've learned throughout your life, things you've heard, common knowledge. There's a lot of stuff like that out there. That's just common knowledge. I mean, we all know, Ronald Reagan was a president, right? So when it's those kinds of things, you don't have to cite that. That's common knowledge. If it's a conclusion you're drawing because you read something and then you said, I tie that together by, thinking through this other article I read, then I watched this video and I see that these ideas come together in this way. Those are your own ideas, so you don't have to cite that. So plagiarism is really, I think of it as whatever you're consuming, which is what Lauren that's the word you just used, which is great. Whatever you're consuming at the time that you're working on this paper, those are the ideas you need to think about citing.
Awesome. We've had a bunch of additional questions come in. One question here, and I just want to reference the slide that you guys see on the screen right now, is about how you sign up for more of Amy's sessions. So Amy does the Student Success Series. We've done it 3 times now, I believe. So we try to host them seasonally when we can. But if you follow us on social media through those social media channels you see up on the screen, that's the best way for you to get the information about what's next. And we host a lot of events, not just ones like this, but we host them for parents, for teachers, for educators, for a lot of different kinds of people. And we also have other kinds of topics. We've done sessions on writing, for example, at times, or some math concepts at times. So check out our social media and follow us, because we do post about the free webinars that we host there. And for Amy's next session, that will be where you would go to get the sign up link for that as well. I believe we also send it in the follow-up email that comes out tomorrow, along with the recording that all of you who signed up will get automatically. Another question here, and I think this kind of references to the different things you might cover in the series, Amy, is have you already done a webinar on note-taking? So both from research and in meetings.
Yes, I did. The note-taking one was, what was the last one we did, Lauren? The note-taking
study skills one. I think you covered note-taking in your study skills one. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Study skills, I talk about note-taking. So you can find that one in this YouTube webinars area. You can watch watch it back.
Yeah, a lot of Amy's topics kind of overlap, but the whole series has a lot of good concepts like note-taking, organizational skills. We've done sessions on goal setting and things like that. So if you want to watch any of the ones we've done before, we're going to point you to our YouTube channel. We actually post every webinar that we've hosted in the past, some of which are repeats here today. And then we'll post the live events like this session on our YouTube channel as well. So it's a good place to go check out all the different webinars that we've done. And you can find the study skills one where Amy covered tips on note taking. Can you go back, Amy, to your bias page? A couple people wanted to look at a couple of your slides again.
Yes.
I don't know if there was a question on the bias. I think they just wanted you to bring it back up.
To do a screenshot. Okay, there. I think that's the one.
It looks like you have another one on, can you review the questions to ask, because there was another screenshot request.
Oh, questions. Yeah. Let me find that one. How about this one? I think that's what you mean.
Amy, while we have some screenshots being taken, I'm curious as a teacher, and I know this from working with so many of the educators that we work with, that sometimes students don't know they're plagiarizing at all, right? It's very innocent. I think sometimes people go to this, they're cheating thinking, but that's not always the case. It's hard to know sometimes. So I'd be curious for if you have any stories of a student situation like that, that it was just the student honestly did not know and it was kind of an honest mistake.
Yes, I all the time. And like 95% of the time, it's totally innocent. It's, you know, a lot of students think that if the assignment doesn't require a reference page, that therefore they don't need to provide one and cite any evidence, so that they can just do the research and present it and not do anything further. And then I catch it because I say, hey, this sounds like it's not you. Like, I can tell that you didn't make that up. Where did you get that from? And if you got it from somewhere, you have to cite it. And so then they're, oh, I didn't know that I needed to have a reference page in this assignment. You didn't require it. But I think that's one of the things that a lot of students get stuck on is they just do what the instructor asks. It doesn't matter if it's required. If you got it from somewhere, you still have to cite it and provide a reference page. And I kind of think almost every assignment really needs that. So I see that a lot where students do that. I also see oftentimes where students just cite once or twice in their paper and think that's good enough, but then there's full paragraphs of information that, again, I can tell they didn't make it up. So you have to cite usually several times within a paragraph. Rarely do you cite just at the end of the paragraph, but at least in every paragraph if the information is not yours. And I think that's another mistake students make. I also see a lot of times students provide, like, maybe there'll be 6 references and then there's only like 2 citations in the paper. And I'll say, okay, you have 6 references. So that's telling me that you found information from these 6 sources, but in the paper, you're only telling me that you found information from 2 sources. So which is it? Did you really find information from 6 sources? You know, so these are like just mistakes. Like, they think, you know, that they've covered all their bases and they haven't. So it's just an accident. But a lot of times those are the main mistakes I see. And I see a lot of direct quoting. Really, honestly, the biggest mistake I've seen lately, and it's not plagiarism at all, it's just way too much quoting. Like 70% of the paper is a quote. And that is not good writing. So that's why I talk about, you know, paraphrasing versus quoting. Big mistakes students make. So it just doesn't show any critical thinking at all. Anybody can copy and paste a quote, put some quotations around it and add a citation and call it good. That's not writing. That's not your writing. So I think that's one of the things I'm really trying to push my students to do is, you know, a quote in your paper is okay. A couple quotes, maybe, but if you have a 2-page paper and you have 17 quotes, it's not good.
Speaking of, and I don't know if you have an exact number for this one, but somebody asked how many references would you need, I guess, give or take, in a 20-page paper?
Ooh, a 20-page paper. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I would say 5 probably at the least for a 20-page paper. But, it all depends on the topic. It all depends on what kind of argument you're trying to make. I mean, is every paragraph a claim? If so, you have a lot of paragraphs. That means that you probably have a lot of references. A lot of times every single claim has a different source. So it's kind of hard to say. But I would definitely say if you have like 2 or 3, probably not enough.
And that's a good, and we always talk about this during these sessions is, we're a resource here through these webinars. And of course, we are a tutoring service. And many of you probably found out about this session because you have access to Tutor.com through your school, through your library, through your employer, through your university. And you have free access. You can go talk to a tutor and get one-on-one help through those Tutor.com programs. But lean on your instructors, right? They'll give you tips for 1, what they're expecting, and 2, what they would recommend. So, don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the big focus of all of our student success sessions is don't be afraid to ask for help. You started today by showing up for this webinar, but there's a lot of investment from schools and libraries and institutions that work with us that they want to support you, right, and help you to be successful. That's why they have such robust support networks and services for you. So don't be afraid to ask for help and use your resources. Okay, one last question, Amy, and then we're going to wrap up for today. Okay. How early do you think students should be taught about plagiarism?
Day 1, kindergarten. No. Honestly, the students that are coming out of high school now and in the past 5 years are well aware of plagiarism because the standards in schools changed, about 10 years ago. So students that are younger are entering college with a much better understanding about what plagiarism is and citing evidence than they did previously. Like when I was a student, we didn't talk about it all that much. We did 1 research paper a year, maybe in English class, right? You would do like 1 big research paper and you would research how to do APA and you would do it. And then by the time you did another one, you completely forgot what the rules were and all of that. Well, it's not like that anymore. They are citing their evidence all the time and providing citations and reference pages in English and social studies and all kinds of different subjects. So students really are more educated now than they used to be. But I will say a lot of adult students going back to school, yeah, the rules have changed. We didn't really cite stuff as much when I was in school and I don't really know how to do this. And so I think it's seriously day 1. It's really, really important for students to understand what plagiarism is and what accidental plagiarism is. Like we talked about, it's not always intentional. Most of the time it isn't intentional at all. But it's good to learn the rules and to know what it means to cite credible evidence.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. As always, these sessions are really helpful. I think to a lot of people, I'm seeing a lot of thank yous coming through for you. So thanks everyone for attending. We appreciate your participation. We hope this has been helpful and we'd love to see you again at Amy's next workshop or one of our future webinars. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening or afternoon. Take care.